All right. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Talking Investing. Here with Tom and George. George, are you
Hello.
there?
Hello.
All right.
Good
Well,
day, huh?
big day today. Nice, very green day for the Bitcoin miners. A nice recovery for the stock market. We have a lot to go through today. We got a lot of stuff on tariffs. We got a lot of stuff on Bitcoin miners. Did some press releases. There was some interesting stuff with Bitcoin or Riot and Bit Farms. Some other Bitcoin miners did their monthly updates. We have all the monthly updates now, so we can go through that stuff too. So we have a load of stuff to go through today. So we'll start out by asking, please hit the thumbs up, smash the like button. It does help the stream out. We are at 6 likes. We're going for 100 likes. We're undefeated, so please help us get to our 100 likes. So you should be able to see the big board here on the side of the screen, and it is green from top to bottom. Bitcoin day over day. So I use the IBIT, which is BlackRock's ETF. So that's from yesterday's close until today's close. Of course, you'll also see, as always, a gold line on the chart. That is where Bitcoin was when the U.S. equity markets closed yesterday. So we were down around 79,500, and we're at around 83,800 right now. So we were up 5.5% today with Bitcoin. Bitcoin miners were green across the board. Maybe a lot of people would have wished they were a little bit more green, but we're going to take a look at a day in the middle of this week that was a historic day. It was, by some measures, the best day in the history of the stock market, and by those measures, it actually wasn't even close. It was twice as good as the next closest day. The Bitcoin mine, I grabbed a screenshot of the Bitcoin miners. I grabbed a screenshot of the altcoins, and then I grabbed a screenshot of the mega ultra market cap companies. And that to me was the most shocking one of all. So we're going to look at those. We had a day on Wednesday that I don't think you can ever count on seeing again for, maybe the next 10, 20 years. So these don't come along. Like I said, it didn't just beat the all-time records. It doubled them. So a very, very strange day. Oh, I'll jump right into Midway. Thank you very much, Midway. Very generous. Thanks for the super chat. Thanks for being a member as always. Midway said Tether bought 4 million more BitDeer shares in the market crash. BitDeer is entering its high growth phase, going to 9 exahash to more than 40 exahash in the next 8 months. I increased my BitDeer position size to 50% of my mining stock money. So maybe we should do a poll. Who's in BitDeer? Whose radar is that? I did notice, because they had to everybody had to file what their, it was that time of the month or quarter or whatever it is. So I saw, Tether is the major owner, and I think they own like 22% of BitDeer. So it sounds like Midway saying they bought the dip, and yeah, BitDeer has not only big plans for exahash growth, but they have big plans on the manufacturing of ASIC miners. They have 4 generations worth of miners they're in the middle of trying to roll out. And if they can do what they say they can do, and I will tell you, I remain skeptical that they're going to get all the way to the finish line. But even if they don't, even if they get to phase 3 out of 4, it's going to be a big news. And if they can get all the way to the finish line, they're going to change the game. And that's, if they do what they said they're going to do, that's probably going to be the best stock out of all the Bitcoin miners to own. The question is if and when, because things in research and development stages take longer than you think sometimes, but they are on a massive growth path regardless of their manufacturing side of this. So thanks for pointing that out, Midway. That was big news, and we're gonna have to keep our eye on that and see what happens to BitDeer, because there's been a big pullback. In December, BitDeer went ballistic, and then ever since then, there's been a gigantic pullback. So for those of you who think, you see a big green day today, I'm going to show you the much bigger, much more green day we had on Wednesday, and you think, man, I missed I missed my shot to buy in. This is not financial advice. I always have to say that. And you guys need to make your own buying decisions based on what you believe and where you are in your investment journey. But most of these stocks are still much, much closer to their 52-week low. I'm speaking of the Bitcoin mining stocks than they are to their 52-week high. Never mind their all-time high. So even with these gigantic run-ups, we still have, you've got Cleanspark in the 7s, Iron in the 5s. You've got you got Bitfarms.
All right, welcome to
Still
Talkin.
Can't even make its way anywhere near back towards $1 yet. So you've got Hive just a little bit off of its lows from the absolute bottom of the crypto winter. So, is there room left? I don't necessarily buy on giant green up days, but I wouldn't, if for those of you who think you may have missed this, I would say the volatility is going to remain and there will be plenty more buying opportunities. That's my guess.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And Midway also added to that. If the Seal Miner A4s wind up being legit and their Canada power plant project winds up working out, BitDeer will have enough megawatts to reach 400 to 500 exahash. So that's what I'm saying. And thanks for clarifying and specifying. The upside, if everything works out their way, they have big plans. And even if they only so in my mind, I always say, better late than never. Things usually take longer than you think. And some of these things, even if they don't get all the way to the finish line, you're talking about laying out a pathway to 500 exahash. That's insanity. If they can get to their 40 that they targeted, and then, over the next couple of years get to 100, they're going to be one of the, I think when this is all said and done with, there's going to be 5 or 6 Bitcoin mining companies. And that doesn't mean that no one else on earth is going to mine Bitcoin. It just means that a lot of the current Bitcoin companies may still continue to mine, but they're already phasing into high performance computing and a bigger, they're allocating larger percent of their resources towards that. So I think those companies are going to fade away as it pertains to, a true investment in a Bitcoin miner. You have really only one absolute pure play. Although I guess you could argue that, BitDeer's a pure play. They just their diverse revenue stream is still within Bitcoin because it's selling Bitcoin miners in addition to mining Bitcoin. And Cleanspark has made it crystal clear they are a 100% pure play. They're not doing anything other than mine Bitcoin. But they are not the largest, right? Marathon's even bigger than they are. Iron is trying to catch up. Riot's trying to catch up. A lot of these companies have big growth plans. So there's a lot more to come. So the White Rabbit said, when is Bitfarms going to stop getting beaten up? Walking right into the trap I always do. I have to have my Bitfarms conversation. I did dollar cost into several things on Tuesday. And Tuesday was a down day. I'm going to go through some of the news cycle. Last Thursday and Friday were historic down days. And then Tuesday was their equal. So, for the S&P 500, from an actual numbers standpoint, the amount of points fallen, so that's not percentage. So, it's not necessarily fair. There's more than one way to look at that. But each one of those 3 days were in the top 10 worst days in the history of the S&P 500. So we've had 3 days in the last, basically, week that were the worst day. On the flip side, we had the best day in the history of the S&P 500 from a point standpoint, and the Nasdaq as well. And both the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq beat the previous all-time one-day point gain. They doubled it. There's nothing. That's why I say you're not gonna see this. And obviously, I don't know the future, so anything could happen. But odds are, this is double the most that's ever happened in history. So odds are you're not going to see that type of day again. However, we've given some of it back. And like I said, the volatility will continue. So there's a lot more excitement to come. But these were crazy days. And I am going to show you guys all those numbers on this stream because I think they're worth look. I mean, they're historic numbers, and we've got historic events going on. The whiplash from the tariffs, on again, off again, raised again, potential tariff wars. I don't even think we're in a potential tariff war anymore. We're in a tariff war. The United States and China. And I'm going to walk through that maybe next, because in just a few minutes, I think we should look at what's going on, because the bottom line is, like, we're past the point of no return in my mind, and we're going to have to see what comes of it.
I don't think people realize what a bad position China's in, by the way. They're screaming the sky is falling. And I got that information from YouTube. There's a channel called China Local or something like that, and I watch it all the time just to get a sense of what's going on in China. It is insane to see how it's just stopped. It's incredible. I mean, everything is stopped. Manufacturing stopped.
Well, they've got fleets of ships full of cargo ships that are full that don't have anywhere to go. They're adrift. So,
I mean, this is not going to last long. This is not going to last long at all.
I don't know what the end of this is, and I think it's worth talking about, and I'd like to see what everybody else, what direction or what end you guys think is going to come of this. Let's start to get through a few of these things here. So first, let's go I just want to walk through. I want to walk through a couple of headlines. Particularly Tuesday to me was the peak of fear, and that is our members only live stream. And we obsessed on this on the members only stream. The market fear and greed index was fluctuating between 3 and 4, and that's on a scale from 0 to 100. So there's one day in the history of the whole index that it was lower than that, and that's when the U.S. shut down the economy for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. If you remember, in 2020, that index got down to 2. Other than that, it was at 3 and 4, and that's the lowest. I mean, effectively, that's 0. That means it's 100, basically almost 100% extreme fear at that point. So as painful as those days are, historically, I mean, it is without fail, that is a buying opportunity. And what did we get the next day? The biggest up day in the history of the stock market. So I just want to walk through some of the sky is falling stuff that was going on. And I'll tell you what I bought into, not financial advice, but I bought into a bunch of things on Tuesday, because it was just like, if not now, then when? That's what George talked about on Tuesday. It's like, if you're not going to buy this dip, like, when are you going to buy? Because I mean, the dips don't get any bigger than this.
Yeah, I just read an article on Yahoo that said this was the single best week ever in the stock market.
That could be. I mean, that one day alone was, I'll show you the one day.
That's insane. And Yahoo doesn't want to be rating that.
So I'm going to walk you from Sunday to Tuesday very quickly, because things happened in rapid succession here. So it all started out on Sunday. CNBC host Jim Cramer warns of Black Monday market crash over the Trump tariffs, rivaling the 1987 collapse. We were down 22% one autumn day of 1987. That was, as a percentage, that was the biggest drop in the Dow and the S&P 500 in history. And, it's known as Black Monday. And he was predicting similar results this Monday. Well, obviously that did not happen. We had a bad Monday, but it was down a couple points. So, actually, the NASDAQ was up 0.1%. So, it was a non-event on Monday. But here we already started over the weekend with the sky is falling. Then we get Dow tumbles more than 300 points Tuesday as the tariff-induced sell-off resumes. So a couple people came out. This is on Tuesday. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink says further 20% market drop is possible. So now you've got a guy in control of 10 or 11 trillion dollars, I say in control, under management, saying, look, we might have 20% more pain to come. He did, however, to be fair, he did say this is a buying opportunity right now. Even though it could get a lot worse than this, they were buying into the sell-off at that point. And then the same day, you got Jamie Dimon, head of JP Morgan. So those are two of the largest financial institutions in the history of the world, warning tariffs could prompt inflation and global economic downfall. The sky is falling. It's going to be the downfall of global economics. So this is all April 7th. So this is all Monday, I believe. Then so the back and forth, the U.S. started with a 34% tariff on China. The U.S. put out last week, they put out their chart of, when and I think the tariffs came into effect in the middle of last week, 34%. So for the most part, according to the chart, and, there was a little bit of funny math on all that, we were doing about a floor of 10% tariffs. And I say, I'm in the United States, so I say we. The United States was putting a baseline tariff of 10% on every country in the world, and then basically 50% of what they were charging us, if it needed to be higher than that. So the U.S. put a 34% hike in. So China responded immediately, and they did a 34% hike. So the United States turned right back around and said, okay, we're going to do another 50% on top of the 34%. So then China turned back around, and that's this article, and said, okay, you're going to do 50 plus 34 is 84. You're going to do an 84% hike. We're going to do an 84% hike on you guys. So now both countries are at 84% at this point. So then we get stock slide again as U.S. forges ahead with the 104% tariffs on China. So it was 84. We put another 20% on top of that. Tariffs on China set to raise to at least 104%. Original 34%. This was the original response. Okay, then we go, okay, so when China put it up to 84%, Trump said, okay, now it's going to be 125% tariffs against China. So another escalation. So the 104% is actually the 50%. The original 34% plus the 50% is 84%. Well, the U.S. had already done two 10% tariffs prior to that, so that's 104%. Now they're raising it to 125%, and then it later comes out. Let me find that article. The White House clarified on Thursday that the U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports are now at least 145%. Not the 125% that Trump had said previously. So 145% tariffs. This is all, bang, 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 bang. You're talking about in a matter of days, this escalated back and forth. And so I think finally, I don't know if I have the article, China has now come out and matched the tariffs at 125%, but they did tend to give a little without outright saying so. They sort of hinted at, we're done. Whatever the U.S. is going to, if they go to 500% or 1,000,000%, this is where we check out. So it could be 125% tariffs, and we're done. So this has escalated to the point where, ships aren't coming to port because they're not going to pay 125% tariff, especially if somehow this gets resolved in a short period of time. You don't want to dock on the 1 week that it's the worst tariff of all time having said that, I think so the other thing that Trump did in the middle was said, hey, rest of the world, we're going to pause everything for 90 days. So that happened on the middle of the day, Wednesday. We're going to pause everything for 90 days with all countries except China. And China, we're going to hit you with another 50%. So that was really, to me, that was in response to China, gave the biggest response to the initial tariff rollout. And then that was just clearly a very narrowing direct response to say, and their rationale was, listen, we've had 70 different countries call us and they want to negotiate. They're willing to negotiate. They want to make a new deal. So contrast that with China, who just immediately started imposing tariffs. And I'm not saying any of this is fair or unfair. I'm just walking you through what happened. The United States basically said, rest of the world, we're going to give you a 90-day timeout. You've called to ask to make deals. We're going to try and make deals with everybody over the next 90 days. At the end of that 90 days, if you haven't made a deal with us, all these tariffs are back on. And the 10% tariff across the board has not gone away. So that's what happened. But when Trump came out and paused the tariffs on Wednesday, this is what happened. Let me go. Okay. So if you guys can see this, George, is this showing up on the... So I took a screen. Yes. I took a screenshot of the final numbers on Wednesday, April 9th. The NASDAQ was up 12%. 12%. So for those of you who don't follow closely the stock market, I have to interrupt myself. We're at 31 likes. If you guys could do us a favor, help us out, smash the like button. It does help the live stream in real time quite a bit. So we would appreciate it. 31. We're looking to get to 100. So, okay. So Wednesday, the NASDAQ's up 12%. I mean, that's 1,857 points it was up, which again was about double the previous highest increase in one day in the NASDAQ. The S&P 500 was up 9.5%, 474 points. That was approximately double the previous record number of points that the S&P 500 was up in one day. But, the Dow was up almost 8%. The Russell was up 8.5%. The NASDAQ in particular. But to see the S&P 500 push 10% in one day, this is a day that you don't see. We don't have these days. So that's why, people talked about it. And what did this result in? So on the way to showing you that, I'll show you Friday. So here was Friday. The S&P was down 5.97%. The NASDAQ was down 5.8%. Thursday was very similar to this. So really all this stuff on Wednesday, all we did was get right back to where we started. We had Thursday, Friday, and Tuesday, 3 of the worst days we've ever had. And then we kind of got almost all of it back in one day by having the best day we've ever had. But look at, the Bitcoin miners, here's BitDeer up 20%, Cypher up 16%, Marathon, the largest of all of them, up 17%, Hive 16%. I mean, BitDigital, which effectively it's not even on our list anymore. They're pretty much have announced they're out of the Bitcoin mining portion. I do have a press release from them where they talk about the high performance computing portion. They've rebranded themselves. They have a new name, and they're going after the high performance computing. But even they were up 2%. But you'll see almost every single Bitcoin miner was up double digits. Some of them, BitDeer was up 20%. Bitfarms was up 23.6%. The company that everybody's been talking about, and that's what started this whole conversation. When is Bitfarms going to retire? I mean, the last 2 or 3 live streams in a row, the debate's been, when are they going to do a reverse stock split? And I continue to say, I had this debate for a full year back in 2022. The answer to that is never. They're going to get back over $1. This price to me, so obviously, I don't know the future, so I can't tell you that with certainty, and this is not financial advice, but to me, it's fairly obvious these companies are beaten down beyond the point of ridiculous, and from 84 cents to $1 is a pretty short trip, and I expect them to get much, in my personal opinion, much higher than $1. So I do not see a reverse stock split for them. They have changed their company a lot. They've gone through a massive amount of turmoil. They've been beaten down dramatically. And there was some news on them this week, I believe yesterday. So we're going to go through that. Their situation with Riot has changed a little bit. So we'll take a look at that as well. But this is just one day. So this is what the Bitcoin miners did. But look at what the, ultra large cap stocks did. Apple's the biggest company in the history of the world. They were up 15% in one day. Right? This chart looks like the altcoins. NVIDIA up 18%, Tesla up 22%, Apple up 15%, Amazon a lowly 12%, Meta 15%, Microsoft, which is they're like a rock. They never have massive swings. They were up 10%, Google almost 10%, Netflix almost 9%. Right? These are the biggest companies in the world. And even their chart looks like, this is erratic behavior. This day, Wednesday, is a day where you just do not see this. And it was across the board. So I took a snapshot of, the 10 biggest altcoins plus some other that people are interested in. And again, super green across the board. But even these altcoins, if you look at these altcoins, this list is not as volatile as the $1 to $3 trillion market cap company list was. So this was a historic up day. Now we paid for it on Thursday. We gave a bunch of it back. Today we got most of it, of what we gave back. So, it's been a roller coaster ride, and there is no reason to believe that the roller coaster ride is over, because absolutely nothing's resolved. Where it sits right now is we're at now, with the clarification from the White House, we are now at 145% tariff on goods coming in from China. I would suspect they're just not going to, other than maybe some super select scenarios, they're just not going to bring their goods here at 145% tariff. And I don't think we're going to bring our goods there either at the 100+% that they've added in response.
Somebody said, I think it might have been Ty, he said that only 14% of Chinese goods come to America.
I don't know the exact number, but that sounds realistic. The biggest consumer of Chinese goods are the Chinese people. They have a billion plus people that live in China. But the U.S. is by far their biggest trading partner. And the United States has a $300+ billion trading deficit with China. So that's why it's kind of for China, they're not really negotiating from a position of strength, because they rely on that massive surplus, what is for them a massive surplus of trade. We're their largest trading partner. And to me, I think there's a chance this is a decoupling of the United States and China, and they're going to, end up drastically dialing back the amount of business that they do with each other. Maybe not to zero, but to some small fraction of what it has been. That's what it looks like to me. Obviously, I don't know any better than you guys do. I'm looking at what's happening, and this is escalating wildly. And, from the United States side of the equation, it's, if we stop trading altogether, all we're just doing is wiping out our biggest trade deficit by far with any country is with China. So, I don't know. We'll do a poll. I see Sourmelon Gaming.
Just saying, hang on a second. That's a real interesting thing. Mr. Lee, I don't trust ChatGPT. These facts are not accurate facts. Just they're not. Pardon my expression. They are. This is just ChatGPT does not spew out the right answer. It spews out the answer from the internet, and that doesn't mean that's the right answer. By the way,
that's a good point, George. And the other thing that I would add to what you're saying is what I have noticed with ChatGPT. If you're trying to find real-time current event type stuff,
yeah,
there's a lag. So a lot of times, if you're asking like what happened yesterday or what happened today, it gets it wrong. And I'm not knocking it because I use the thing all the time, and it is an unbelievable resource for those who have never tried it, in my opinion. But it does get, the shorter the time frame, the more wrong it gets, and it does get stuff wrong. You can't just depend on that. Having said that, yes, I mean it's not like half the goods that China make come to the United States. It's some much smaller percentage. But we are their largest trading partner, and they have a gigantic trade surplus with the U.S. So, from their perspective, trade with the U.S. is fantastic. So the last thing they want is an escalating trade war. Now, nobody wins from a trade war is the reality. So, it's not great for either side.
The other thing is, as I watched the one article that on YouTube with China, is that they've made a lot of people from China made a humongous infrastructure into Vietnam, because Vietnam is, cheaper.
Well, I think, yes, over the last several years, you've seen Vietnam and Taiwan take a lot of China's, and it's not necessarily them taking it. It's a lot of U.S. companies in particular, and other companies, I'm sure, moving to hedge their risk against what has been, listen, the United States and China have a volatile relationship. So, over the last 5 years, if anybody hasn't figured, newsflash, that's been happening for 5 years. So a lot of companies over the course of 5 years have been trying to diversify where they make things so that if something catastrophic like this happens, they don't get stuck with, relying on just manufacturing from that one place. So there's already been a big diversification. In fact, I have.
Well, how about this? I started I guess it's been, oh wow, show my age. 20 years ago, I started selling Chinese cabinets in Atlanta, Georgia. And they moved to Vietnam almost 8 years ago now. And they did it because of the currency manipulation, they said. That's what they said. But they still call them Chinese cabinets.
Okay, let's put up. So we'll start with Sour Melon Gaming. Let's quickly just get a feel, and I'm not going to spend all day talking about tariffs, but what I will say is the reason we're talking about this, because we talked about on our Tuesday members only live stream. I thought we didn't talk about politics. Why are we only talking about? The fact of the matter is, right now, 99.9% of what's happening in the market is tariffs. That's what's dictating the trade on almost every stock, almost every single day. We're in the middle of an unprecedented event. The United States has never had a day where they declared we are now renegotiating every single trade deal we have with every single country in the whole entire world. So since then, the market is confused, baffled, terrified, and that is what is dictating all of this volatility in the short term. I imagine a lot of this will smooth itself out over the next 90 days, and I think it'll be sooner than later. I said that on Tuesday, we're going to get good news sooner than later, and then on Wednesday everything got paused 90 days. So I certainly didn't think it was going to be that soon, but there's more from the position we're sitting right now, in my opinion, just based on where we're at. There's more good news ahead than bad news. We just got all the bad news. Right? And the bad news got worse and worse and worse. And we all now know we are in a clear, tariff war with China. And that battle that's not going to resolve itself quickly. But, if the rest of the world all gets onto the same page, and I will tell you, China is begging the EU to side with them and get on board and try and, have some solidarity and negotiate together. But I think that's a very unlikely, that's almost a desperate
what's that Peter dude's name? Peter something or another hates Bitcoin. Peter.
If
Yeah. Does this vindicate him for what he said about the stock? He's been saying about the stock market for the last, I don't know, 3 years. He just said that there's going to be a major correction. A lot of people have been screaming that.
well, and isn't he one of the Bitcoin haters?
Oh yeah, he hates it with a passion. But does this vindicate people like him screaming that the stock market's going to crash? I say no, by the way.
I say, I mean, it's hard to say that the stock market crashed when we just had the biggest up day in the history of the stock market.
Right.
So,
can you believe
volatility
so many people,
is real?
There are so many people that I know sold, and it's just like, well, if you don't need money, why sell? And just one person in particular is losing his mind over this.
So I'm asking Sour Melon Gaming's question, basically word for word. Do you support the United States Trump tariffs? I'm calling them the Trump tariffs, but the United States tariffs. Are you for them or against them?
And if you don't, and listen, we tried to be apolitical here. Try to is the key word. And if you don't agree with them, tell me what you do agree with. Like, yeah, I don't agree with them. Here's why I don't. I just want to see if maybe you can convince me, because I support the tariffs personally. And there's and it's funny because somebody brought up a clip from Ronald Reagan saying that tariffs are not a good thing. But, Ronald Reagan was the president before Bill Clinton. And
we didn't trade with China when Ronald Reagan was president.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton agreed to let them enter the World Trade Organization. Sorry for interrupting.
But that was a totally different time. He would not say that today. I just don't believe he would say that today. Because NAFTA is what really destroyed America, I believe.
Well, we had Ross Perot telling us, screaming as loud as he could, that was going to be a nightmare, and it was.
Yeah. If you go to any little town outside of any major city, you see serious problems. Like somebody was showing me a video, and all these small towns are they've withered up, and they've used things like cotton mills in Georgia was a great part of things, but there's just so many different little cities that have just gone away because we've lost so much industry.
Well, right. And that is a part of, so let me get to Midway first. Thank you again for the super chat. Thanks for being a member. Midway says, my only political related super chat. Trump didn't write any of the art of the deal book. He paid a ghostwriter who came up with the whole thing. So I cannot neither verify nor debunk that.
I don't even know. Well, I mean, that, you know what? If that's true, I mean, that's pretty impressive. You know that? Even one with art of the deal. He didn't have to come up with it.
I will say this. I don't know the answer to that super chat. Thank you. I'm sorry, Midway. But thank you for the super chat. And you guys can discuss and decide whether you agree or disagree with that. But what I will say is, whether he wrote the book on this or not, this is unquestionably a negotiation. Now you can argue, is it a good negotiation? Are we going to, is the United States going to win more than they lose on these negotiations? We don't know the answer to any of those questions yet. This was, hey, we're going to negotiate with 150 countries all at the same time, starting now, right? So obviously that created massive fear and uncertainty, and it remains to be seen, where these land. I do think this. So in other words, that nice chart that he put up with all those numbers, I don't think that was ever the finish line. In a negotiation, you do not open. You didn't have to write art of the deal to know you don't open with your absolute best offer, right? That's not a negotiation. So there is a compromise to come for a lot of these countries. And I do think that this administration looked at all of our deals and basically looked at it and said, listen, our trade deals can't possibly get any worse than they are right now. So really, what do we have to lose? Other than short-term fear, panic, some of which has happened. And I'll tell you why I think this 90-day pause went on. The 10-year Treasury note started to ramp up. Let me see if I happen to possibly. So here, we were down here on 4.4, and you can see like this thing's been going up, except for one day, pretty much in a straight line. And the 10-year Treasury note, now, this is a 1-month chart. If you look at a 1-year chart, it's not outside of the range it's been trading in. But I do think nobody wanted to see if this line was a line up in a straight line and it took out the previous high, this was going to start to be this is the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. You know, we were getting the 10-year note under control. You can see it was trending downwards. So I think this was a big factor in the 90-day pause. The stock market was getting whacked, but this, you know, the 10-year note was going in the wrong direction fast. And, you know, the White House came out and said, well, this was exactly always our part of our plan. This is exactly how we planned it. I don't know that that's true or not. It didn't seem like that was the plan to me. This seemed a little reactionary in my opinion, but I don't know that. But in any event, you know, the obviously with the pause, the market loved it. It had its all-time run.
What was I going to say? The thing that I'm looking forward to, and you know, I don't know if this is going to play out this way, and this is the reason I'm for tariffs, is because if that makes the IRS go away in the United States, that's amazing. And that was the reason for that is the reason for all this turmoil right now, because it doesn't seem like the message is being delivered the right way. Yeah, and that's another thing. If we want to be a pure, you know, known as a crypto whatever, you know, the crypto superpower, right? We would have to make these mining units here in the United States, because what's the sense of having you're mining in the United States, but the machines are made from China?
Well, that's a part of the cost, but I'm going to go to an article because this is not as everybody thinks it is. So, and Gary also brought that up, so I want to give him credit. He asked in the chat, Tom, how exactly does adding tariffs help achieve Trump's goal of having all Bitcoin mining in the U.S.? So it certainly doesn't. And again, I think this is a part of a much larger negotiation to come to more fair trade agreements, or at least, you know, from the U.S.'s perspective, to move them a little bit more in the right direction. It's hard for them to move any further in the wrong direction. So I think there was very little at risk doing this other than this short-term chaos. But let me find this article, because I think this is the
You want to
answer.
know the worst word ever made in America or in the English dictionary? Tom just said it. Fair.
Oh, yeah. What's fair?
What's fair?
That's
fair to me might not be fair to you. And that could be, you know, very true in this time of negotiation.
So this article came out yesterday, how the Bitcoin miners are adjusting to the threat of tariffs. Before April 9th, miners were paying upwards of $3 million for chartered flights as they tried to outrun the impact of Trump's import levies. Some miners are comparing the tariffs to China's 2021 mining ban. Now, what I want to get to in this article is this down here. The initial panic was in response to the now outdated tariff policy. Before Wednesday's 90-day pause on all but China's tariffs, the Trump administration had proposed blanket tariffs on more than 180 companies, including 24% on Malaysia, 36% on Thailand, and 32% on Indonesia, 3 countries that predominantly manufacture the ASIC miners. So I know back in the day, these were all made in China 5, 6, 7 years ago. There are a lot of Chinese companies, but they're not being made in China anymore. And that doesn't mean that there's zero of them being made in China, but these three companies, these three countries is where these facilities have predominantly moved to. And for the next 90 days, there's no, the tariffs are on pause. So, let's see how the negotiation goes with Malaysia and Thailand and Indonesia. And these will be important trading partners. So I suspect that, add Vietnam to that list, add Taiwan to that list. I think you're going to see those. You're going to see Japan first. You're going to see the UK near the top of the list of the first ones that we come to a deal with. But I think you're going to see all of the other countries I just mentioned be, near the top of the list of countries that we want to keep a good trade in place with and not be disruptive and get to a deal before those 90 days run out. So I expect we will have a deal with all of these countries before the 90 days run out. So I think this could end up being more of a blip. And then this says, during the 90-day grace period, the Trump administration has lowered the reciprocal tariffs to a flat rate of 10% for all affected countries except China. So the scrambling seems to have been somewhat in vain. So we'll see, right? But this is the reality. These are the countries we need to make deals with if the United States wants to, because obviously if, we're not going to buy any more machines at 100 or 125% tariff, the mining companies cannot, it becomes unaffordable for them to buy the next machine. But at 24%, or what probably gets negotiated down to, numbers that are much smaller than these numbers, I think that it's more of a road bump than anything else. So that's my opinion. That's what I think is going on. That's, here's an independent article that's kind of giving you the real information here. So take it for whatever it's worth. You agree with the US/Trump tariffs? So we are at 46% yes, 54% no. I'm going to call the poll right there, but very close to a coin toss again, as our polls have been for the last many weeks, because everything is this uncertain. When there's this much uncertainty, this is the type of poll results you get. 50-50, plus or minus. You know what I mean? It's like, who knows?
I'm telling you, I mean, somebody said something, Ken said this, Trump attacking his closest allies in the most ridiculous thing he could have done. Well, I think Trump doesn't have any allies. I think the United States have allies. And I hope you understand that. I don't think Trump looks at anybody as an ally.
Well, he looks at it,
except Israel.
Looking at what he's looking at, and if you go back, this is not some half-baked thing. Just go on YouTube and look up, Trump 40 years ago. He's literally saying word for word the same thing he's been saying about tariffs for the last 40 years. And in that 40-year period, what's happened? We keep negotiating worse and worse and worse deals. So for me, I'm obviously, every country wants their own country to benefit from trade. And as an American, I'm looking at a trade deficit with almost every country in the world. We pay more tariffs to almost every country in the world than they pay to us. It's like, what are we doing? Why this stuff is obvious. Now, how you go about executing that, I understand. Some people may say this was way too much, too soon, too fast, and all that. So you can disagree with all that, but it's hard for me to formulate a scenario where you say, you know what, the U.S. should just keep doing what they're doing. We run at a $2 trillion deficit a year. We have trade deficits all over the world. We are at $37 trillion of debt, and we're adding a couple of $1 trillion to that every year doing what we're doing. So it would be insane to continue to do what we're doing. Now, what we have to change to, I don't know. This is what this administration is trying. We'll see if it succeeds or we'll see if it fails. Honestly, it can't get much worse, because if you project this out, I mean, what's the United States going to have, $100 trillion in debt? I mean, that's non-functional. That means our interest will be significantly more than the total amount of money we collect from taxes and tariffs. So, it's not sustainable. Something is going to change. And I think this will find its settling point. the one big thing that's now become crystal clear inside of 1 week is this is really targeted between the United States and China. I do think most of these other countries are going to relatively swiftly come to an agreement that what is fair. George was asking, and there's no answer to that. What's fair in a negotiation is to whatever both sides agree to. That's what they've agreed to. So I think we're going to see a lot of renegotiations come in. And to me, as each one of those happens, that's going to be good news for the stock market. We already just ate all the bad news. We got to shove down our throat, and we had to eat it all at one time. And by the way, the S&P 500 did get down to bear market territory. It was down 21.5% at one point. The NASDAQ was down over 25%. The Russell was down over 30%. That's market crash territory. So Bitcoin was down over 30%. So we've had a lot of pain. And I'm not saying that, today's the bottom and it's up from in a straight line from here, but I do think particularly you've seen Bitcoin hold up particularly well. I've saved several articles talking about the fact that, Bitcoin's been one of the best places to be during this whole situation. So,
all right.
I think this has been good news for Bitcoin. The Bitcoin miners, because their equities, they've been even much more volatile than Bitcoin. And we'll take a look at what they did this week. We'll do that next, but I want to get to Midway first. Thank you very much, Midway, for the super chat. Very generous. And thank you for being a member. If the tariffs get very annoying, BitDeer has so many megawatts located outside the U.S. that they could probably reach 60 to 70 exahash over the next 12 months just from installing their own A2s and A3s in Bhutan and Norway. So that's all true. I mean, if you're a company like BitDeer, and I'm glad you're talking about the A2s and the A3s, because I feel like even if those get to market a little bit later than expected, those two I have a lot more faith in. The Seal 4, which is talking about 5 or 6 joules per terahash, I remain a skeptic on that, but they don't need to get to that point. If Midway just laid out a scenario where if they can just get the Seal 2 and Seal 3, which is their own Bitcoin, so they don't have to rely on somebody to buy them. They don't have to pay their taxes on Bitcoin machines is zero no matter where they produce them because they're making them themselves. So that's a big advantage. And, they do have a big runway of energy infrastructure to grow their company. So for whatever that's worth, and they're down a bunch. We'll look at that next. So, some people may feel like this is a good buying opportunity. Thank you again, Midway. So let's look at what the Bitcoin miners did, because we haven't even looked at the chart.
Did you hear about China though, and how they brought in? I don't think it's that many. I think it was 1.5 China. Apple, they brought in 1.5 million units of phones and 5 planes of phones or something like. Did you hear about that?
Before the tariffs hit, they got everything they possibly could.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Robert Anderson saying, anyone else think the U.S. miners could get an incentive to support strategic reserve? That is interesting because Trump has not only talked about he's very crypto friendly. This administration's very crypto friendly. And again, I know some of you like Trump and some of you despise Trump. That's just how this world seems to be divided on that issue. And most of it is, I think, personality. And, so whatever your opinions are, doesn't matter. What has been true is Trump has come out very pro-Bitcoin. The administration has already implemented, and I have a bunch of articles I can show you today. I mean, we are rapidly moving towards a much more Bitcoin/crypto friendly environment in the United States. He said he wants the U.S. to be the Bitcoin mining center of the universe. He said he wants 100% of it here. That's an unrealistic goal. Trump is prone to hyperbole. I talked on the members only stream. I heard somebody say something that I think is very good advice. Don't take Trump literally, because he does, I'm adding the fact, he is prone to hyperbole, period. So don't take Trump literally, but take him seriously. In other words, if he's talking about something, he may be grossly exaggerating what he's talking about, but if he's talking about it, it's on his radar. Take him seriously that he's going to take some action towards the things he's talking about. And I think we've seen that play out. And you may like some of the things that he's doing, and you may hate some of the things that he's doing, but they are in line with all the things he talked about doing when getting into office. So a lot of people feel like we're moving at, much too fast speeds, and it's very scary. There's a massive amount of uncertainty. I'm going to go to the VIX. So you can see, we've pulled back over the last week, but we're still over. Anything over 35 only happens every couple of years. So 35 or higher is like an event this is the volatility index. So the market got up to 60 on the volatility index. That's one of the top 4 spikes in the history of the VIX. So again, historic type stuff happening surrounding all this tariff stuff. The VIX only 3 other times in history has spiked up to this level. And even despite a giant pullback, it's still above this 35 level, which I consider panic. So, we're in less of a panic than we were at 60, but we're still at 37. This is very, very high. You can see I have kind of a baseline here down at around $12.68. So, between $12 to $18 is a very historically very normal place for the VIX to be. 35 is extreme fear, and 60 is 4 times in the history of the thing. So this is what I'm saying. People are feeling this volatility is a reflection of, and I'm going to go to the fear and greed index too, because this is kind of points out really where we got to and why I bought so much on Tuesday. So the fear and greed index, this is not the crypto fear and greed index. This is the market. So the fear and greed index is jumped up to 13, which is still deep into extreme fear. But on Tuesday, it was at 4. And you can see it did get as low as 3. There's only been one day in the history of this index that it's been any lower than it has been. And we had 4 days where it was either 3 or 4. Not until that pause came out on Wednesday did it get out of that territory. It had been there for days. So, on a scale from 1 to 100, when you're at 4, that kind of speaks for itself. You're almost at the maximum amount of fear, extreme fear possible as measured by this index. So when's the best time to buy? Historically speaking, every time you get into extreme fear, it doesn't always pay off the next day, but if you look at the charts, if you zoom out, without exception, those are the best buying opportunities in the history of the stock market. So, that doesn't mean that this time is different. Maybe finally, every time this happens, everybody says this time is different. For the following week,
time.
Right. And we've been on long enough now, 4 or 5 years we've been doing this, to go through several different times where I said, nope, I know that's always been true, but this time is different because of XYZ. That's never happened before. But guess what? Those every single time, massive rebounds. So,
well, for me personally, I feel that in America, things couldn't be any better for opportunities for, creating manufacturing jobs, creating companies, working for yourself. There's just so many opportunities out there. I look at things more of an entrepreneurship mindset than versus, a person that goes and gets a job and works for somebody. But if you have that type of mindset, hit me up, Discord. I'm Kudab, COM. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody and help them out if they're thinking about starting a business as much as I can, money aside, obviously. But, the SBA route and how to do it's a great, the United States has probably one of the best programs out there to help Small businesses start a company. And that's what people don't understand. My whole thing is paying it forward. You know, I was stuck in corporate America for years and I couldn't wait to get out. And I never looked back. Well, I look back quite a bit, but now that I finally got over the hurdle, I don't look back. I mean, think about it. You can start an accounting firm right now, Tom. I mean, and probably have the least amount of staff ever and kill it. All through AI and making the stuff that's out there work for you.
Yeah, we're having leaps and bounds in technology right now. If you use it properly and you learn how to use it, and
one of the things, and I'm sorry that you know I always talk about the United States, but one of the things that I'm focused on is I'm focusing on the celebration for the 250th year anniversary, which is next year. I'm probably the first person even talking about it on YouTube, but I have invested heavily into making sure that that is the most amazing event ever, at least for me, in our lifetime. It's going to be. Did you know they invited all the different people around the world to come in for this big sale250.org? I don't know if you know anything about it, Tom.
I don't, but I'm old enough to remember the bicentennial, which was the United States 200th anniversary.
Yep.
And that dominated everything for a year. It was the biggest event. And, you know, we're a new country. I know a lot of people are in countries that are much, much older and have a lot more history than the United States. But, you know, 200 was a giant deal. 250 is a big deal. So, yes, I mean, that's coming. And I think, you know, no one's talking about it now except you, but that's going to be a big deal. And I'm going to read Pogo. Pogo loves Sue Ennis. First of all, thanks for being a member, Pogo. And he said, please hit the like button for Tom and George. Thank you. So thank you, Pogo, for pointing that out. We're at 64 likes. Is this going to be the first time ever we don't get to 100 likes?
Which is crazy because this is the best week ever, you know?
This is more stuff has happened this week than ever before. So people should be excited. But without hitting the like button, nobody, you know, the algorithm doesn't pick us up and we don't go anywhere. So help us if you enjoy this, whether you agree with us or not, if you enjoy the opportunity to chat with everybody. And a special thanks to all of our members who really, we have great chats on Tuesday after the market closes. We do our members only. So much going on Tuesday, and then Wednesday, the whole entire game changed, and it's been a wild ride ever since. Let's get to some of the other stuff that happened, because there were a few things happened this week inside of the Bitcoin miners. Not really an event, but Cleanspark was honored among the top 35 of the 500 fastest growing companies in the Americas. So this is not the United States. This is North America, South America. This is the entire Americas. They were ranked number 35 on the list. So Cleanspark is one of the fastest growing companies in the world. And you guys know that's one of the things that I own. It is one of the things I dollar cost averaged into on Tuesday. So, and it's been one of my positions all along. It is, in fact, my only Bitcoin mining position that's still in the green. These companies have been hit so hard, and we'll take a look at where they are from the top, that this is the only one, and it's still significantly in the green. So the two that I bought the most during the crypto winter were CleanSpark and Bitfarms. Well, CleanSpark's been so decimated that I went from up about 250%. I'm now red on Bitfarms. I'm now red on Bitfarms. But CleanSpark, despite this gigantic pullback, it's nowhere near its lows from the crypto winter where I bought heavily. So I'm still very, very green on this. It's my last one. I don't want to jinx everybody and, you know, go red on my final. But
yeah, what is your CleanSpark average, Tom?
It's in the low 4s. So I'm still in a very good spot on this. And, you know, I bought some under, it was under $2 at one point. I was dollar cost averaging it. And I just bought when it hit the 6s. I just bought some more on Tuesday because to me, CleanSpark, and it was in the high 6s, but it's like, are you kidding me? At 12, I called a floor of 12 on this. I thought when it got down to 12, the market was being silly. And now for it to get under 7 into the 6s, and that's where I bought it on Tuesday, it was totally ludicrous. And we discussed this. It's like, and it's okay if you're done with these companies, if you've given up on the Bitcoin miners, and or if you're just going to try and let it ride and hope that you get back to break even and get your money back. But if you are bullish on these companies, like after the run from Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, they were down to places I never thought I would see again. So, you know, I bought into I dollar cost averaged into most of my existing Bitcoin positions. So I took that.
Tom, no one's talking about this, but it is a full moon tonight.
Aha!
So I'm expecting great things out of Bitcoin.
That's good. Our full moon detector. I want to go show you guys what while we're on it, and then we'll come back to this. So actually, we didn't even talk about this. So this is what happened this week. So this was you win some, you lose some. Bitcoin was flat on the week. And that was as a result of a massive roller coaster, right? If we look at the one-day Bitcoin chart, Sunday was a nightmare. Monday, we bottomed out. And then on Wednesday, we kind of confirmed that double bottom here. You'll see we got down to around 74,400 on Monday and Wednesday. And that was about the time Trump said, okay, tariffs are on pause for 90 days. And gigantic green day, and then a red day, and then a green day. So it's been, I mean, this is volatility. This is our volatility. Having said that, we're just not out of our range. I mean, we talked about being stuck in a range between, we did dip out of our range for a little bit, but I think we found a nice floor, and you can see it was almost exactly at this purple line that's been on the chart for, years at around 73,800. We didn't quite get down to that, but I do think we found support. I think this is a local bottom, and I think there's a lot of indicators that say that we're in the bottoming out process, which can take days or weeks or sometimes months, but I don't think you're going to see us break radically to the downside. And George, you may disagree, and some others may disagree. We'll have a poll on that. Let's get a poll going right now.
Well, Tom, I did what I said I was going to do. I didn't sell anything, even though it's hurt.
It's hard. It's hard, especially, if you're one of the many, many people, we keep saying buy the dip, but the fact is, we've had 100 opportunities to buy the dip. At some point, you just don't have any money left to buy the dip. So I know some of you are in that situation, and, hopefully it's not fun. You just got to wait it out. And if you get your hands on a couple of bucks, so be it. If not, I mean, I understand. This has been outrageous, and I'm going to go look next at what I'm talking about. For the Bitcoin miners in particular, the Bitcoin miners and the altcoins are virtually in a crypto winter right now, and it's for no reason at all. Bitcoin is it's pulled up way off of its all-time high that it hit, but it's still way above its high from the previous cycle. And I think you're going to see when I show you the next couple of charts, we're about to move into an area where we're going to hit some much higher numbers, in my opinion. I think the technicals look good. Now, I will say that what we talked about on Tuesday was when there's a monstrous event like these tariffs, it doesn't matter. I don't care what the technicals say. This tariff thing is just affecting every stock, every Bitcoin, altcoin. I mean, there's no escaping this. Even gold was down for a couple of days. I mean, there was just no safe haven. But I do think the worst of that is behind us. Even though most of the journey to get to the end of this tariff situation is ahead of us, I think the worst of it's behind us. The most uncertainty.
Don't you think Bitcoin was a good safe haven to be in during all this?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin was one of the. I think gold and Bitcoin were the best places to be during this whole little.
I was in shock because Bitcoin didn't really go down until later.
Yes. Yeah, Bitcoin held up a lot better than there was an article. There's just too many articles, so I didn't save it, but it was basically went, line for line on how Bitcoin's been less volatile than the S&P 500 for the last 2 weeks. So you don't see that happen very often.
I think this is a perfect setup to stick it to us again. But I hope not.
Oh, Larry brings up a good point. There should have been a no that you don't think it's going down to any of those numbers. Thank you, Larry. That's a fair point. But it looks like, well, most of the 57% are saying it could get down to 74,000 again. And listen, we were there on Monday and we were there on Wednesday. So it's certainly not hard to believe that that's people believe we can get there. 69,000, that was the high from the previous cycle. An additional 23% think we can get that low. 18% think we could get down to $55,000. And then my bottom number, there's a line of support that if we break, then in my opinion, Bitcoin's broken and dead. And I think there's no chance we'll get there. However, 4% of you think we will get to 48. And I'm not saying there's no chance we'll get to 48. I don't think there's any chance we're going to break below 48 and go down from there. That's just my opinion. To me, that would be with all the adoption and everything that's going on. Yeah. If we fall into this quickly into another full-blown dramatic crypto winter, then that means there's some other scenario going on that I can't fathom. But anything's possible. So the majority of you were at the higher numbers. You could see 74K happening. You could see 69K happening. I mean, we're only a stone's throw from either of those numbers. So that's my purple line and my yellow line right here. They're not my lines. These are lines of support. And 69,000 being the previous all-time high set back in November of 2021. And we've been above that for, since November. We have not retested this line. If I go all the way, the day we jumped, well, I guess you could say immediately we did. So we bumped into it as resistance. We got there. We retested it here. This was back in the beginning of November. And then on this day that we broke out, we've never been anywhere near 69,000 ever since. And that was since the beginning of November. We're now nearing the middle of April. So this is a long time to have held that line. So I think these are ultra strong lines of support that we are hanging around at. And then this is okay. So this is the 1-day chart, and for whatever this is worth, we've had a descending line of resistance dating back to the middle of January. So that's 2.5 months, and we've bumped into this several times. You can see the green lines are where we closed. So we closed almost at this line here. We candle wicked to it here. We candle wicked above it like 4 days in a row, but never closed above it. We candle wicked to it here. Today is the first day it looks like we could close above this descending line of resistance. That would be bullish. And you can see on the daily RSI, we're hanging out right at 50. We're at 51, 50 and a half. So And in addition to that, we had a bullish crossover today on the 1-day time frame on the MACD. So between getting over 50 on the RSI, having a bullish crossover on the MACD, and if we can close above what has been a multiple month line of descending resistance here, I think all that's bullish in the short term. Now, that may just mean we go run up and test this line real quick and head back down, but this is a short-term bullish thing. But what I'm more looking at is this is the 1 week time frame. This is a bearish divergence that played out, this goes all the way back to a year ago. So in other words, we formed a higher high with Bitcoin, but a lower high with the 1 week RSI. That is a bearish divergence, and that tends to indicate that it's probable that the next move is down or bearish. Well, you can see we're now, from this high, we're now like 3 months into, bearish activity. So this bearish divergence has played out. This is weak. If you look, we had a bearish crossover on the MACD in addition to this bearish divergence on the 1 week time frame. We're now 10 weeks into that. And for the first time, we've now gone from red on the histogram to pink, which, is now a smaller candle moving in the right direction. So a lot of this, we're holding this line that I have that goes all the way back to, on the weekly RSI, we've held since January of 2023, 2 years ago, over 2 years ago. We basically held this line at 44%. We got under it for 1 day and jumped right back above it. So I think when we look at this 1 week time frame, and these play out over longer times, so it could be another few weeks or few months before we get the big move to the upside. But I think that's the next move. So that's why I remain very confident that we've played out. Like, we get these. For those of you who have been here, done that, and I know it's most of you, we get 30% pullbacks in Bitcoin. We got a 55% pullback on Bitcoin right in the middle of the bull market in 2021, right? We hit 65,000-ish in late March or April. We plummeted down to 29,000, only to turn back around and hit 69,000 in November. So, 20%, 30% moves. And if we look at this move from the peak, absolute bottom, this was a 32% move to the downside. So we did have one of those last year. We had 5 20% or more pullbacks in 2024, in a year where Bitcoin was up 122%. So you can see these short-term pullbacks, they are not a sign that we've flipped bearish. This is what Bitcoin does. So we had out of the 5 20+% pullbacks, one of them was over 30%. So here we are in 2025. We've already got a 30+% pullback, but I still remain very bullish. I think we have not had at all the last phase of this bull market. And, there's a lot of speculation that we're going to be in what they're calling a super cycle. This is going to be an extended cycle. We may never have, I do think we will always have bull markets and bear markets. I do think that cryptocurrencies, particularly the altcoins, will always be more volatile than the major indexes, whether it be in the US or other countries. So this is a more volatile space, but I really don't think you're going to see these 70, 80% pullbacks anymore. I think the crypto winners are dead. There's just too many forces. We've reached a critical mass to where there's just too much money in here and too many new positive catalysts happening now and ahead. So time will tell, right? I didn't think we were going to have a crypto winner after the last cycle, and we did. And it was a bad one. So, I guess time will tell. But, we had an SEC that, sued anybody that even said the word cryptocurrency. We had,
wow, what a great poll this has turned out to be, by the way.
Yeah.
This is all, I agree. I'm right in line. I said 69. What do you think, Tom?
I think you guys are right on the money. It's fair to say that we could easily pull back to 74. We just did that twice in the last week. and 69 is not a far cry from that. So those two, I think, are in play. I really don't see that gigantic break. I mean, we just had every single index just had a catastrophic 2 days on Thursday and Friday. They all basically had a short-term crash. And then Monday was even and Tuesday was bad again. So they had a 4-day trading period that was a disaster. Bitcoin is basically sideways in that period of time. So if the bears were in charge right now and we were going to lower numbers, that's when it was going to happen, in my opinion. And it didn't. So
they tried,
but failed. So to me,
I think China tried harder than anybody else.
There seems to be a buying wall somewhere around $74,000 that is very strong because they just could not get it below that, no matter what everything else in the market was doing. So we'll see what happens. I'll end this poll.
So Michael Anthony asked us, what would be, if you were going to buy a Bitcoin right now, what do you think has the least amount of risk? Bitcoin miner, sorry.
A Bitcoin miner, the least amount of risk?
Yeah, not necessarily the most upside, but the least amount of downside right now.
I think the bigger you get, the less volatility risk you have. So to me, Marathon, Cleanspark, Riot. I'm not saying those are the best 3 companies, but there's 2 reasons. They're bigger market caps and they have big hodl positions. So I think those are your safer bets. That doesn't, obviously the smaller market cap, the more chance there is for a bigger run. And the more that these are down, the more chance there is for a bigger run. And I'm going to go to that chart. I'm going to put this poll up and then I'm going to go to a chart that I want to show everybody because these Bitcoin miners have been absolutely decimated in a way that to me makes no sense at all. So I'm going to do, this is a poll we've done several times and I just want to see sentiment changing or are we the same? Okay, so this is the opposite question. We just asked how low can we go. Now, how high can we go? Where do you think Bitcoin will get in the peak of this cycle? And I'm saying somewhere in 2025, 2026. I don't know when the peak is. So the first choice is 110K or less. In other words, we've already been to 109K. So if you think the bull market's over, that's your answer to pick. 150K, 175K, or do you think we can get to 200,000 or more? If you do, then you are not alone because here's a couple articles.
I think this weekend really is going to tell a lot about how the rest of the year is going to go for Bitcoin, by the way.
Over the weekend? Well, and
this weekend.
And yeah. And that's a good point. And I want to look at the ETFs because something's going on there as well. So Cardano's Hoskisson sees Bitcoin touching 250K. So there's a voice saying 250K.
I mean, can you imagine if it hits 250K? That's just insane. Let's be honest. That's crazy. It's something gold hasn't ever done. That type of return.
The return on Bitcoin to date is something that nothing will ever do. Now, if you're just getting in right now, how going forward, who knows?
Do you still think buying Bitcoin right now is a safe play?
I do. Yes. I added to my Bitcoin on Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
I added, and again, this is not financial advice. Everybody is different, but I'll just tell you, I bought into, I added to my CleanSpark position. I added to my Marathon position, my Riot position. I'm playing Bitcoin through BlackRock's iBit. So I bought Bitcoin, I bought into Bitcoin, and I bought options, January 2026 options at 50 cents and at $1 for Bitfarms. So I did my buying on Tuesday. I honestly thought I was going to get a couple of more bites at the apple. I thought we would have one or two more buying opportunities in addition to this. But, like George was saying on Tuesday, if you're not going to buy, after that historic falling off of a cliff, if you're not going to do some dollar cost averaging in now, what are you waiting for?
There is one. I am waiting for one other thing.
Yes. What?
The end of this month. I still think that there's going to be some type of tariff. I mean, some type of martial law or something in the United States.
You're expecting some
type of volatility. How about that? Can we use that word, volatility?
Yeah, something to cause massive volatility in the short term, you're thinking.
I got to take a work call. Hey.
Pogo said 153,500. I saw it in a dream, but I also had a nightmare. It was 35,500. It's not going to be 35,500. 153,500. I think, that looks 150,000 so far is winning this poll. If you haven't voted, feel free to vote. And if you have not hit the like button, maybe we will get to our 100 after all. We're at 82 likes. Thank you to everybody who has hit the like button. If you just got here or if you haven't hit the like button yet, it really does help us out a lot. So it's much appreciated. I will tell you, I came into this bull market, a year and a half ago, targeting 150,000 as the peak. And maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, I bumped that up to 175,000. So that's where I think we're going to land, somewhere between 150 and 175,000. That's my personal opinion. The way this poll is playing out, 16% think the bull market's over. 110 or less, we already got to 109. So maybe we revisit our highs and then that's it. So that's now 18%. So that is not insignificant. Almost 1 in 5 think the bull market is over. 48% think $150,000, now 50%. 12% think $175,000, and 21%, so a little bit more than the pessimists, 23% now think $200,000 or higher in this bull market. And I will tell you, I would certainly not be surprised at all if it ends up going over 200,000. I'm still looking at that 150 to 175 range as the most likely outcome here. I will be very surprised if the bull market is over and we don't go past 110,000 in the next, 12 to 15 months. That would be the one of these 4 scenarios that would surprise me, but I've been surprised before. I've been wrong before. I will be wrong again. That's just how this works. Get back to, so looking at what the Bitcoin miners did this week. Again, Bitcoin was about break even, and half of these were in the green and half in the red. So Cypher was up 15%, and there was no particular news on Cypher. I looked high and low. There was no SEC filings other than their monthly operational report, which was, it was good, but it was nothing. There was no information in there that was a surprise. It was exactly as expected. So, but they had a great week, up 15%. Marathon, the largest by market cap, had a great week, up 11%. Hut up 7%. Hut had big news. I can't remember if that was last week or this week.
I think it was this, wasn't it? Maybe it was last week. They all go together now.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of different things. They're opening a new business that they're going to own 80% of. Eric and Donald Trump will own the other 20%. It's not publicly traded. It's going to be accounted for. It's going to roll up into Hut 8 from an accounting standpoint. And it basically, they're breaking off their Bitcoin mining segment. They moved all of their Bitcoin mining assets into that company. And they did their monthly operation report, and their exahash rate doubled. So after 3 years of not increasing at all, in fact, the last 6 months, it's been decreasing. Their exahash rate doubled in March. Their efficiency as a fleet went from, I think, over 29 joules per terahash to somewhere just under 21 joules per terahash. So that's a doubling in the size of their fleet, a massive increase in the efficiency of their fleet. And they did announce they're targeting getting to 50 exahash with this subsidiary. And they also talked about the fact that in addition to their goal being to get to 50 exahash of Bitcoin mining, they want to spin this subsidiary off and take it public. So that would mean that ultimately in the long run, Hut 8 would be the energy company, and this new company, like I think it's American Bitcoin or something to that effect, would be where the Bitcoin mining is. But for the time being, I mean, Hut is an 80% owner in that company. So they had a lot of big news. So they were up 7%. You would think they'd be up a lot more on all that news, but it was a crazy week. And then a couple of these had a real tough week. And I think it's no coincidence. There's two companies that stopped putting out monthly updates. They are Bit Digital and TerraWolf. So here they are in last place on this list by far. Down 8% and down 8%. TerraWolf not only is not putting out monthly operational reports, they're radio silent the last month. So I'm not sure what's going on at TerraWolf. This is a couple of months in a row they didn't put out an operational report. And Bit Digital, I will just quickly go to this just to let everybody know where they're at. Bit Digital announced today that it has secured the rights to a new data center site, which is under development and will support the previously announced 5 megawatt co-location agreement with Cerebras Systems, a leader in generative AI infrastructure. So this is all under, I just want to get to, the project is being delivered through White Fiber. So this is their rebranding. They are rebranding their high performance computing portion of their company as White under the label White Fiber. So their Bitcoin mining portion of their company is just dwindled away. They were down to like mining 40 Bitcoin a month. And they were going down every month. So I just think they stopped doing monthly operational reports because they're just not in this business anymore. Doesn't mean they're out of business. They are in the high performance computing / AI business. And you can see they're getting new contracts. They're creating new infrastructure. And they're, in fact, rebranding themselves as White Fiber. So that's what's gone on with Bit Digital. I've taken them and TerraWolf off of my monthly comparisons because they're not giving us any information. So obviously it's impossible to compare and contrast if you don't have any information. Let's go quickly take a look at what everybody did. Everything. Well, this is it. Bitcoin production in March of 2025. So you can see Marathon in first place. They've been in first place every month for the last year and a half. 829 Bitcoin. I want to go to my other chart because it shows some other information. So Marathon in first, up 17%. Now, from February to March, there's a 10.7% increase in the number of days. So 10.7% increase would have been a flat line. So you can see almost every company beat that. It was actually a phenomenal month for the publicly traded Bitcoin miners in the United States. Marathon up 17% month over month to 829. Cleanspark up 13%. Riot up 13%. Iron up 16%. Core Scientific up 15%. There were two standouts. Bitfarms was the standout, up 31%, almost double everybody else, until Hut came out and said they increased their their exahash by, double, and they mined 91% more than they did in the previous month. So you can see Hut mined 46 in the previous month. And just to show, if I go back another month, Bit Digital was down to 32 Bitcoin a month. So this is why I'm saying they're kind of out of the business. When we got companies mining 800 Bitcoin a month, 32 is just not relevant anymore. But they're now all reported, and from top to bottom, every single company mined more Bitcoin in March than they did in February, largely due to the fact that there's 3 extra days, but most of them even went above and beyond that. And the standouts were Hut, up 91% month over month. They still finished in 11th place with 88 Bitcoin, 2 behind Canaan. They will certainly pass next month, unless something bizarre happens. They will pass Canaan, Hive, and BitDeer next month and move up this list I would expect them at 8, not 11, but we'll see. We got to let the month play out and see what happens. But a phenomenal month operationally for all the Bitcoin miners. So why then, we go to, this is year to date. This is what the Bitcoin miners have done in the year 2025. And then I'm going to show you from the cycle high to date. So from the 2024 highs, not back in 2021, not from the all-time highs, not from the 2021 highs, just from the highs within the last 12 months is going to be the next chart I'm going to show you. This is an awful, so you can see this was basically the first quarter plus a week. It was the worst first quarter in the last 10 years for Bitcoin. So it was a rough quarter. You've got BitDeer down 64%. So, we had a bunch of super chats from Midway kind of making the case for BitDeer, and there is a case to be made. And if you're interested in buying it, oh, by the way, they're down 64% this year. So, this is getting very interesting. TerraWolf down 58%, Core down 50%, Cypher 48, Hive 48, Bitfarms 46. That's on top of the 50% they were down last year. I mean, these are bad numbers. So I want to go from the high. So this was a different date for each Bitcoin miner, right? They didn't all hit their recent high on the exact same day, but this is from their 12-month high. This is what's going on with the Bitcoin miners. This is a half a step away from a crypto winter. You've got Bitcoin after rallying. It was down as much as 30%. Bitcoin's down 23% from its new all-time high that it hit. The best Bitcoin miner is down 62% from its 12-month high. Most of the Bitcoin miners are down between 70 and 80% from their high over the last 1 year. That's a disaster scenario. So one of two things is going to happen. Either these companies stink and the market's left them behind and they're dead money, or the other way to look at this is, operationally, we just saw every single one of those companies outperformed month over month. Some of those companies are doing better than others. There's been massive growth. And if Bitcoin rallies, is there a lot of upside? I think there's a lot of upside to these companies. This gigantic pullback, as horrible as it feels to live it and go through it, it could end up being one of the great buying opportunities of all time. Now, obviously, maybe it's not. So that's where due diligence comes in, and that's where knowing where you stand in your own portfolio. Is this money you need in the next 12 months? Well, I wouldn't invest that. Is this money you're not going to touch for a few years, etc.? Right? You guys understand due diligence. So it's important because you can see if you've owned these for the last year, you've gotten crushed. I've gotten crushed on these. I mean, Cleanspark's down 70%, and I'm still green. So that's the power of dollar cost averaging. Right, buying all the way through consistently with Cleanspark and Bitfarms, but Bitfarms is down 80%, and I am not in the green anymore on Bitfarms. So I'm in the red on everything other than Cleanspark. But you can see why. I mean, we're from 62 to 80% if you're rounding, just since the 12-month high. So this is a tough space.
That's a great question, Pogo. Do you think some of the miners we follow could go bankrupt in this year?
I mean, we're down to a list of 11, and if you count Bit Digital, which we're not following because they're not doing reporting anymore, and TerraWolf, which we're not following, I don't think any of these companies are going out of business this year. But I do think some of these companies are not going to participate in the gigantic run-up. So we're going to have another situation where there's going to be the winners and the losers. I see somebody saying, Bitfarm killed my family, Hive killed my soul. That was Pogo. I get it.
True.
I mean, look, you got Hive down 73%. You got Bitfarms down, rounding, if you round up, it's down 80% from its highs. I mean, and that's not from its all-time high, by the way. Its all-time high was almost triple the number I'm measuring from. I'm measuring from, I believe, $3.91, but it got to, I think, $9.36 back in 2021. So from $9.36 down to, it was down to 60-something cents on Tuesday. So this is why I was buying in. And Pogo was saying, any mergers with any of these companies buy some of the other smaller ones. So the only actual true Bitcoin merger of publicly traded companies was Bitfarms buying Stronghold. Now, there was a lot of merger and acquisition activity, but it was mostly the Bitcoin miners buying energy infrastructure to get more vertically integrated and have room to grow. The only actual scenario where one of these companies bought another one was Bitfarms buying Stronghold. Now, Riot made a hostile takeover attempt on Bitfarms, and I have an update on that because they had to report what's going on. So they put out a press release and they had to file some stuff with the SEC. So let's just take a look at that before we wrap things up. And we're at 92 likes, so we're already going into overtime here on the stream. Let's see if you guys can help us and get us to 100 likes. Or is this the day, George?
This is the day.
The day the streak ends.
Yes.
Help us if you can. So Riot put out this press release. Riot Platforms early warning report press release regarding waiver and irrevocable proxy. So it's more confusing here. I want to show you. I got a couple other ways that this is a little less confusing. So Riot Platforms filed their 13D. So they now own, if you go down here, you're going to see they now own 16.3% of Bitfarms. So that is down. And now you'll see these numbers are different. Sole voting power, 54%. Sole dispositive power, 54.8 million on voting rights, 90 million in total shares of stock, which make up this 16%. They are keeping their voting shares of stock under 10%. This is 9.9% of the voting stock. With the rest of the shares in the middle, the other 36 or 7 million shares, they have, through proxy, given Bitfarms the right to vote all of those shares. So this is to remain in compliance. So they've given up a bunch of their rights on those shares. And this article, I'll just show you. Somebody wrote an article. Riot's irrevocable proxy play signals strategic patience in ongoing Bitfarms takeover struggle. So this person thinks this is just a step in hanging in there, trying to take over. I disagree with that. I think that maybe they hold out hopes that somehow Bitfarms stock is going to get so brutally destroyed that this window is still open. But you'll see in September, under the deal, Riot is prohibited from acquiring more than 20% of Bitfarms without prior board approval. So they were hanging out at that 20% for a long time. They're now down to 16.3%. So they've already let that slip. And So why would Riot cap its voting power? So in other words, why did they turn over 36 million shares and give up the proxy to Bitfarms itself to vote those shares? Could sidestep Bitfarms' poison pill, according to VanEck's Matthew Sigel, which triggers at 15% and would nuke Riot's stake. A shareholder rights plan, commonly known as a poison pill, is a defense tactic against an unsolicited or what we call a hostile takeover that makes a company less attractive to a potential acquirer. So we all know they put that poison pill in place. So these are the steps they're taking to avoid that kicking in, because that would be catastrophic for Riot and their investment in Bitfarms. So I think they're going to wind themselves out of this. For those of you who think that Bitfarms is going to continue to spiral down the drain, then you may be right. Then Riot will get a chance to buy them at some kind of pennies on the dollar, already being a big shareholder in them. But that's not how I see this playing out. That's my opinion. So any other parting thoughts, George? It's at 98. We're not going to get there.
I have no thoughts.
No parting thoughts for the weekend?
No thoughts.
All right. Well, I'll give you my parting thoughts for the weekend. First of all, everybody, thank you for joining us on the stream. George, thanks for spending time
I got
with
it.
us
I got one.
Oh, okay. Go.
90 by Monday. BTC.
Bitcoin 90,000 by Monday. Wow. All right. You went from nothing to something.
No, and 99. Oh, the likes are in at 99.
Come on. One time. We'll see what happens. So that's a bold. There we go. 100 likes. Thank you so much, everybody. We just made it under the wire. So thanks again to everybody for joining us on the live stream. Special thanks to all of our members for all of your support and thoughts. We'll see the members Tuesday after the market closes. We're here every Friday after the market closes for everybody. So hope to see all you guys next week. Tell your friends, spread the word. We do this every Friday, and there is a lot going on. You can see there's a massive amount to talk about. So thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. And so have a good night.
See you.